The mortarboard felt ridiculous on Darius Blackstone's head, but not nearly as ridiculous as the wilted dandelion crown a 3-year-old had just plopped on top of it. "Pretty princess," the toddler announced to the entire graduation ceremony, his sticky fingers still tangled in Darius's dark hair. "You need flowers because you look sad." 2,000 people turned to stare. Somewhere in the crowd, his cousin Jake was probably crawling under his seat. Again. Darius blinked up at the small boy who'd somehow escaped the chaos of families packed into the university's outdoor amphitheater. The kid wore a dinosaur t-shirt covered in what looked like breakfast and wielded a fistful of weeds like they were precious gems. "Marcus Antonio Martinez, you get back here right now." A woman crashed through the row of folding chairs like a hurricane in flip-flops, leaving a trail of spilled coffee and scattered goldfish crackers in her wake. She had wild curls escaping from a messy bun, a stain that looked suspiciously like peanut butter on her sundress, and the kind of frazzled energy that suggested she'd been running on fumes for approximately 3 years. She skidded to a stop in front of Darius's wheelchair, breathing hard. "I'm so sorry. Marcus, honey, we don't put flowers on strangers. Even pretty strangers. Especially not during their graduation." "But Mama," he was sad. Marcus protested, patting Darius's cheek with a hand that smelled like goldfish and grape juice. "Sad people need flowers." The woman, Elena, if her shouting was any indication, looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. "I'm Elena Martinez, and this is my escape artist son. I swear he was just sitting next to me eating crackers and then," she gestured helplessly at the disaster zone around them. "Then he decided I needed a makeover?" Darius found himself saying, carefully extracting the dandelion crown from his graduation cap. Something weird was happening in his chest, like his heart had forgotten how to beat properly. "It's not a makeover, it's medicine," Marcus said solemnly. "Flowers make people happy. Abuela told me." Elena's cheeks flushed pink. "Abuela also told him that ice cream for breakfast builds character, so we're working on fact-checking." She reached for her son, but Marcus had apparently decided Darius was his new best friend and wrapped his arms around his neck. "Are you really a princess?" Marcus whispered loudly enough for half the graduating class to hear. "More like a former king," Darius said, surprising himself again. He never talked about pack business with humans. Never talked at all if he could help it. But something about this tiny tyrant and his disaster of a mother made him want to keep the conversation going. "A king." Marcus's eyes went wide. "Do you have a castle?" "Marcus, sweetie, let the nice man enjoy his graduation," Elena said, trying to peel her son off Darius without success. "I'm really sorry. He's usually not this friendly with strangers." "I don't mind." And Darius meant it. When was the last time someone had looked at him and seen anything other than the wheelchair? When was the last time someone had declared him anything other than that paralyzed alpha, or the wheelchair warrior, or whatever creative nickname the supernatural community was using this week? "Are dandelions really flowers?" he asked, holding up one of Marcus's offerings. "Or are they weeds?" Elena paused in her son-wrangling efforts. "Botanically speaking, they're flowers. Society just decided they're weeds because they grow where we don't want them." "Flowers that nobody wants," Darius mused. "Sounds familiar." Something flickered in Elena's eyes, understanding, maybe, or sympathy. "I think they're beautiful. They're survivors. They grow through concrete, bloom where nothing else will, and spread their seeds on the wind like tiny wishes." Marcus finally released Darius and bounced on his toes. "See? Flowers. Good flowers for the sad king." Elena laughed, and the sound did something dangerous to Darius's carefully guarded heart. When was the last time he'd heard a laugh that wasn't forced or pitying or nervous? "You know what," she said, reaching into her enormous mom bag, "I think you deserve proper flowers." She pulled out a slightly crushed pack of flower-shaped gummies. Marcus's emergency snacks, but they're technically flowers. "Gummy flowers," Darius said solemnly, accepting the package. "Much more practical than the real thing." And they taste better, Marcus added helpfully. For a moment, sitting there with Elena Martinez and her chaos magnet son, Darius felt something he'd thought was lost forever. Normal. Not the former Alpha King of the Northeast Territories. Not the supernatural boogeyman who terrorized rogue werewolves from Maine to Maryland. Not the paralyzed has-been collecting a business degree he'd probably never use. Just Darius. A guy at his graduation, talking to a pretty woman about flowers and their philosophical implications. Darius Blackstone. The announcement crackled over the loudspeaker. Business administration, summa cum laude. Elena's expression shifted, and Darius watched something close off in her face. Blackstone, she repeated slowly. As in, that paralyzed alpha? The one they call the wheelchair warrior? And there it was. Reality crashing back in like it always did. Elena, we should go, someone called from the crowd. The ceremony's almost over. She was already backing away, scooping Marcus up despite his protests. Congratulations on your graduation, she said formally, all the warmth gone from her voice. Elena, wait. But she was already disappearing into the crowd, Marcus waving sadly over her shoulder and calling, bye-bye, sad king. Don't forget your flower medicine. Darius sat alone in his wheelchair, holding a crushed pack of gummy flowers and a wilted dandelion, watching the best 5 minutes he'd had in 2 years walk away. His heart was doing those weird flippy things again, and he had the uncomfortable realization that maybe Marcus had been right. Maybe he was sad. Maybe he did need flowers. And maybe, for the first time since the accident that had cost him his legs and his pack's respect, he wanted something more than just surviving each day. He wanted to see Elena Martinez again. Even if she'd probably run screaming in the opposite direction now that she knew who he really was. Chapter 2. Elena Martinez stared up at the gleaming glass tower that housed Manhattan's most exclusive penthouses and wondered if she'd accidentally walked into the wrong building. Again. This is the place, right, buddy? She asked Marcus, who was pressed against her leg like a barnacle, clutching his stuffed wolf with one hand and a juice box with the other. It's really tall, Mama, Marcus whispered, craning his neck to see the top of the building. Do giants live here? Rich people, Elena muttered, checking her phone for the address one more time. Which is basically the same thing. She'd taken the cleaning job through an agency without asking too many questions. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and after her babysitter canceled at the last minute, again, she was down to bringing Marcus with her or missing rent. The mysterious client had apparently requested someone discreet and thorough, and was willing to pay triple the usual rate for twice-weekly cleanings. Elena had been suspicious until she'd seen her bank account balance. Suspicion was a luxury she couldn't afford. The penthouse elevator required a key card, which the doorman had handed over with the kind of disdainful sniff usually reserved for people who shopped at discount stores. Which Elena absolutely did, so fair enough. Penthouse A, she told Marcus as they rode up in an elevator that was probably worth more than her car. Remember what we talked about? No touching the fancy things, no running, no yelling, and if the scary man in the chair gets mad, I hide behind you, Marcus recited dutifully. Elena blinked. What scary man in a chair? But the elevator doors were already opening, revealing an apartment that made Elena's entire neighborhood look like a dollhouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Central Park that probably cost more per month than she made in a year. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum, all clean lines and expensive woods, and Elena was pretty sure that was actual marble in the kitchen. Holy sh, she caught herself just in time. Holy cannoli. Mama, this is like a palace, Marcus breathed, his juice box forgotten in his wonder. Remember, no touching, Elena started, but Marcus was already wandering toward the living room, drawn like a moth to the massive flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. That's when she saw him. Darius Blackstone sat behind an enormous glass desk in what appeared to be a home office, his wheelchair positioned with military precision, his dark hair still as unruly as it had been at graduation 3 weeks ago. He was wearing a charcoal gray sweater that probably cost more than Elena's monthly grocery budget, and he was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You've got to be kidding me, Elena said out loud. Ms. Martinez, Darius said smoothly, like running into each other was the most natural thing in the world. I wasn't expecting you so early. Elena's brain struggled to process this information. You're my client? You're the one who hired me to clean your... She gestured helplessly at the apartment, your fortress of solitude? Is that what we're calling it? One corner of his mouth twitched up. I prefer a moderately comfortable living space. Moderately comfortable, Elena repeated faintly. Right. Because this is what moderate looks like. Marcus had apparently overcome his shyness and was approaching Darius's desk with the fearless curiosity of a 3-year-old who hadn't yet learned that some adults didn't want to be bothered. You're the Flower King, Marcus announced, pointing his stuffed wolf at Darius. I remember you. Darius looked down at the small boy and something in his expression softened. And you're the dandelion supplier. I still have your flowers. Really? Marcus bounced on his toes. Did they make you happy? They helped, Darius said solemnly. Elena felt her heart do that weird flippy thing again, the same one that had gotten her into trouble at graduation. Marcus, honey, Mr. Blackstone is working. We should let him. Actually, I could use a break, Darius interrupted. And please, it's just Darius. We're practically old friends. Marcus apparently took this as permission to climb onto the arm of Darius's wheelchair like it was playground equipment. Elena lunged forward to stop him, but Darius just steadied the boy with one large hand. Careful there, little man. This thing doesn't have seat belts. You smell like my wolf, Marcus announced, holding up his stuffed animal for comparison. See? Same smell. That's why I'm gonna call you Wolfman. Elena wanted to disappear into the marble floor. Marcus, we don't call people names. It's fine, Darius said, and she could have sworn she heard laughter in his voice. Wolfman works. Marcus settled more comfortably on the wheelchair's armrest, apparently having decided Darius was his new favorite person. Why do you have wheels instead of legs that work? Marcus. Elena's voice came out as a squeak. It's okay, Darius said, meeting her eyes for a moment before looking back at Marcus. I had an accident that hurt my back, so now I use wheels to get around. They're faster than walking anyway. Cool, Marcus said, with the easy acceptance of a child. Can I have a ride? After your mom finishes her work, Darius promised. Elena stared at him. 3 weeks ago, he'd been the legendary wheelchair warrior, the paralyzed alpha that the supernatural community whispered about in hushed tones. Now he was bargaining with her toddler like any other adult trying to manage a 3-year-old's demands. I should probably get started, she said, hefting her bag of cleaning supplies. And Marcus should stay out of your way. He's not in my way, Darius said. Actually, I have some calls to make. He can keep me company if he wants. Elena wasn't sure what alternate universe she'd stumbled into, but she needed this job too much to question it. Okay, but if he gets too much, just tell me and I'll... Darius's phone rang, cutting her off. He glanced at the caller ID and his expression shifted into something harder, more businesslike. I need to take this, he said, then looked at Marcus. Think you can be my assistant? I might need backup. Marcus nodded solemnly and settled into a chair next to the desk, his stuffed wolf clutched in his lap. Elena retreated to the kitchen, trying not to eavesdrop as Darius answered his phone with a crisp, Blackstone. But the apartment's open floor plan made privacy impossible, and after a few minutes, it became clear this wasn't a normal business call. I don't care what the Northern Territory thinks about my methods, Darius was saying, his voice taking on an edge that reminded Elena exactly who she was dealing with. The contract stands as written, and if they don't like it, they can roar. Marcus interrupted loudly, making dinosaur claws with his free hand. Roar. Elena dropped her cleaning spray and rushed toward the office area, but Darius was already covering the phone's mouthpiece with his hand. What was that? He asked Marcus conversationally. You were getting growly, so I thought you needed dinosaur backup, Marcus explained seriously. Dinosaurs are scarier than growls. Darius blinked at him for a moment, then uncovered the phone. Sorry, Patterson. Where were we? Oh right, you were about to agree to my terms. Elena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but whatever Patterson was saying made Darius's mouth curve into something that wasn't quite a smile. Pterodactyl. Marcus screeched, spreading his arms wide. Did you hear that, Patterson? That's the sound of my patience running out, Darius said smoothly. 48 hours, or we find another distributor. He hung up and looked at Marcus with what Elena could only describe as admiration. That was extremely effective negotiating. Where did you learn to roar like that? Mama showed me, Marcus said proudly. She does it when people try to make her do stuff she doesn't want to do. Elena felt heat creep up her neck. I do not roar at people. You roared at the mean lady at the grocery store, Marcus pointed out. When she said I was too loud. That was different, Elena muttered, returning to her cleaning. She was being unreasonable. Mama's really good at roaring, Marcus told Darius confidentially. But she cries after, when she thinks I can't see. Elena's hands stilled on the countertop. Trust her 3-year-old to share her most private moments with a virtual stranger. Sometimes roaring is necessary, Darius said quietly. Even when it makes us sad. Elena glanced over to find him watching her with those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. She turned back to the counter, focusing on scrubbing a spot that was already perfectly clean. Over the next hour, she fell into a rhythm. Clean, listen to Marcus chatter at Darius, panic when her son got too comfortable, repeat. But Darius seemed genuinely entertained by Marcus's constant stream of observations and questions. When another business call came in, Marcus automatically provided sound effects, roars for emphasis, chirps for agreement, and what Elena thought might have been a whale song during a particularly long pause. Your assistant is very effective, Darius told her when she brought him a cup of coffee. I closed 3 deals this morning. He's not usually so. Elena searched for the right word. Helpful? Attached, she said finally. He's usually pretty shy around strangers. Maybe I'm not a stranger, Darius said. Maybe I'm just someone who needed dinosaur sound effects in his life. Elena was trying to figure out how to respond to that when Marcus's voice cut through the air. Ow. Mama, I hurt myself. Elena dropped her cleaning rag and rushed to where Marcus had apparently bumped his knee against the coffee table. He was sitting on the floor, tears streaming down his cheeks, clutching his leg. Let me see, baby, Elena said, kneeling beside him. But Marcus was already placing his small hands over the scrape on his knee, his face scrunched in concentration. Elena had seen him do this before, but she'd always told herself she was imagining things. Kids healed fast. It was normal. Except it wasn't normal for a scrape to disappear completely under a 3-year-old's touch. Elena glanced up to find Darius staring at Marcus with an expression she couldn't read. When their eyes met, she saw recognition there, and something that might have been understanding. That's quite a gift your son has, Darius said carefully. Elena's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you mean. Elena. We should go. Elena scooped Marcus up, ignoring his protests. I'll finish cleaning tomorrow. You don't have to run, Darius said, his voice gentle. I'm not going to hurt either of you. I'm not running, Elena lied, grabbing her cleaning supplies with shaking hands. I just remembered I have somewhere to be. Mama, I want to stay with Wolfman, Marcus complained, reaching toward Darius over Elena's shoulder. Maybe next time, little man, Darius said, rolling his chair closer. Your mom's right to be careful. There are people who might not understand how special you are. Elena froze. What do you know about my son? I know that gifts like his are rare, Darius said quietly. And that there are people who would do anything to control them. Or exploit them. Elena's grip on Marcus tightened. Are you threatening us? I'm offering to help, Darius said. If you'll let me. Elena stared at him for a long moment, seeing not the wheelchair warrior or the alpha king, but just a man in a too-big apartment who'd spent the morning letting her son climb on his wheelchair and provide dinosaur sound effects for business calls. A man who knew what Marcus was and hadn't run screaming. A man who smelled like her son's favorite stuffed animal and growled when he was thinking. "Why?" she whispered. "Because someone put a dandelion crown on my head and told me I looked sad," Darius said simply. "And because I think we understand each other better than either of us expected." Marcus had gone quiet in Elena's arms, but she could feel him listening to every word. "I don't know if I can trust you," Elena admitted. "I don't know if you should," Darius replied honestly. "But I do know that running from everything that scares you isn't a solution. Eventually, you have to stop and fight." Elena thought about her ex-boyfriend, about the phone calls that came at 3 in the morning, about the way Marcus sometimes flinched when men raised their voices. She thought about the job she'd lost when Marcus's abilities became too obvious to ignore, about the way people looked at them when they thought she wasn't watching. She thought about the way Darius had looked at Marcus, not with fear or greed, but with understanding. "One more hour," she said finally. "But Marcus stays with me." "Fair enough," Darius said, rolling back to his desk. "But for what it's worth, I think he's safer with both of us watching out for him." As Elena set Marcus down and returned to her cleaning, she couldn't shake the feeling that Darius Blackstone was right about more than just her son's safety. She was tired of running. But trusting a werewolf, even one who let toddlers use him as playground equipment, might be the biggest risk she'd ever taken.
Chapter 3. Elena was pretty sure she was hallucinating from exhaustion. It had been a week since she'd started cleaning Darius's penthouse twice weekly, and between that job, her morning shift at the diner, and her weekend gig cleaning offices, she was running on approximately 4 hours of sleep and whatever caffeine she could mainline between Marcus's nap schedule and her ex-boyfriend's increasingly unhinged voicemails. Which was probably why she was standing in Darius Blackstone's marble foyer at 7 in the morning, holding a bag of cleaning supplies and watching her 3-year-old son arrange crayons in what appeared to be some sort of mystical pattern on the coffee table. "Marcus, buddy, we've talked about this," she said, setting down her supplies. "Crayons are for coloring, not for whatever ritual summoning thing you're doing there." "They're not for summoning, Mama," Marcus said patiently, the tone he used when he thought she was being particularly dense. "They're organized by how loud their colors are. See? Red is very shouty, but blue whispers." Elena rubbed her temples. "Right. Of course. Color volume. That's totally normal. Is everything okay?" Darius appeared from his home office, already dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Elena's car. His hair was perfectly styled, but she'd learned to read the slight tension around his eyes that meant he hadn't slept well either. "Marcus is having philosophical discussions with crayons," Elena said. "So, Tuesday. The blue one is sad," Marcus announced, holding up a navy crayon. "It misses its pack." Darius went very still. "Its pack?" "Uh-huh. Like how you miss your pack sometimes. That's why you get growly during phone calls." Marcus looked up at Darius with those two knowing eyes that made Elena's stomach clench with worry. "The sad wolf voices tell me things." Elena's cleaning supplies hit the floor with a clatter. "The what voices?" "I should probably explain," Darius said, rolling his chair closer to where Marcus was sitting cross-legged on the floor. "Marcus, do you remember what we talked about yesterday? About keeping some things just between us?" "But Mama should know about the sad wolves," Marcus said seriously. "They're getting louder." Elena looked between her son and the werewolf he'd apparently bonded with, feeling like she was missing half the conversation. "What sad wolves?" "Darius, what is he talking about?" "It's complicated," Darius began, but Marcus was already scrambling to his feet. "I'll show you," Marcus announced, placing his small hands on either side of Darius's face with the casual intimacy of a child who'd decided someone belonged to him. "Close your eyes, Wolfman." "Marcus, no," Elena started, but Darius was already closing his eyes, his expression shifting from wary to something that looked almost peaceful. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Darius's breathing deepened, and Marcus began humming softly, a melody Elena had never heard before, but that made something in her chest ache with longing. "Oh," Darius whispered, his eyes flying open to stare at Marcus in wonder. "You can hear them. The pack bonds. The ones that were severed. They're really sad," Marcus said solemnly. "But they still love you. They're just scared because you can't run with them anymore." Elena felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "Pack bonds? Darius, what is my son doing to you?" "He's healing me," Darius said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "In ways I didn't think were possible." Before Elena could demand a better explanation, the elevator dinged, and the penthouse doors slid open to admit a stream of people in expensive suits. Elena recognized the type from her office cleaning gig, corporate sharks with briefcases full of bad news and power plays. "Darius, we need to," a woman with silver hair and predatory eyes stopped mid-sentence when she spotted Elena and Marcus. "I didn't realize you were entertaining." "Board meeting," Darius explained to Elena, his professional mask sliding back into place. "It shouldn't take long." "Should I come back later?" Elena asked, but Marcus was already gathering his crayons. "Can I color under the big table?" he asked Darius. "I promise I'll be really quiet." "The conference table is not a fort," Elena started, but Darius was already nodding. "As long as you don't disturb the meeting," he said. "And stay away from the power outlets." Elena watched her son skip toward the dining area that apparently doubled as a conference room, trailing crayons and coloring books. "Are you sure about this?" "He's not always great with volume control." "It'll be fine," Darius assured her, but Elena caught the slight hesitation in his voice. "These meetings are usually pretty boring anyway." Famous last words, Elena thought as she retreated to the kitchen to start cleaning. But she could hear everything from there, including the moment when the meeting took a decidedly hostile turn. "Leadership challenges continue to mount," the silver-haired woman was saying. "The Northern Territory is questioning your authority, the pack elders are concerned about your physical limitations, and frankly, Darius, your recent behavior has been erratic at best." "My behavior has been exactly what this organization needs," Darius replied coolly. "Profitable, efficient, and forward-thinking. From a wheelchair." The voice was younger, male, and carried the kind of casual cruelty that made Elena's hands clench around her dish rag. "Let's not pretend your condition hasn't affected your ability to lead." Elena moved closer to the kitchen doorway, her protective instincts flaring. She couldn't see the speaker, but she could hear the satisfaction in his voice as he continued. "Face it, brother. A real alpha leads from his feet, not his seat. It's time to step aside and let someone who can actually run with the pack take control." The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded either violence or very creative profanity. Elena held her breath, waiting for Darius's response. Instead, a small voice piped up from under the conference table. "That's not nice." Elena's heart stopped. "Excuse me?" The younger voice sounded confused. There was a rustling sound, and Elena could picture Marcus crawling out from under the table with his crayons clutched in his fists and that particular expression he got when someone had violated his sense of justice. "I said that's not nice," Marcus repeated, his voice carrying clearly across the apartment. "Wolfman is the goodest alpha. He gives me juice boxes and helps me organize my crayons by color volume, and he doesn't get mad when I make dinosaur sounds during his phone calls. Also, he smells like pack and safety, and pack means family, and you don't say mean things about family." Elena closed her eyes, torn between mortification and fierce pride. Her 3-year-old had just lectured a room full of supernatural executives about leadership philosophy. "Did a toddler just school you, Caius?" Elena heard someone whisper, followed by what sounded like poorly suppressed snickering. "A human toddler," another voice added. "This is priceless." Marcus, Darius's voice was carefully controlled, but Elena could hear the warmth underneath. "What did we say about interrupting grown-up meetings?" "That I should only do it if someone's being really, really mean," Marcus said matter-of-factly. And he was being really, really mean about your wheels. Your wheels are cool. They're faster than walking, and they make that neat spinny sound when you do tricks. Tricks? Kaya sounded like he was choking. Uh-huh. Show him the spinny thing, Wolfman. Elena didn't need to see Darius's face to know he was mortified. But she also knew him well enough by now to recognize the moment when his sense of humor overtook his professional dignity. Maybe after the meeting, little man, Darius said. Why don't you go color with your mom for a while? Okay, but first, Elena heard the soft thud of small feet on expensive carpet, followed by Marcus's voice at what was probably eye level with the hostile brother. You should apologize to Wolfman. Mama says when we're mean to people, we have to say sorry. The silence stretched so long that Elena actually peeked around the doorframe. She could see Marcus standing next to Darius's wheelchair, one small hand resting possessively on the armrest, staring down a room full of adults with the fearless confidence of a child who'd never learned to be intimidated by anyone. Caius, and Elena could see the family resemblance now, the same dark hair and sharp cheekbones as Darius, but without the warmth, was staring at Marcus like he'd never seen a human child before. I don't apologize to humans, Caius said finally. Marcus considered this for a moment, his head tilted to one side. That's okay. Mama says some people aren't ready to be sorry yet. But the sad wolf voices in your head are really loud, and they're making my teeth hurt, so maybe you should think about it. Elena watched Caius go pale. Around the table, the other board members were exchanging glances that ranged from confusion to what looked like dawning understanding. Marcus, Darius said gently, remember what we talked about? Some things are private. But he's hurting, Marcus protested, looking up at Darius with those two wise eyes. And when people hurt, we help them. That's what Pac does. This child, the silver-haired woman said slowly, is he human? Darius said firmly. Completely human. Just very perceptive. Elena knew he was lying to protect Marcus, and she loved him a little bit for it. But she could also see the wheels turning in several board members' heads, and she knew that Marcus had just painted a target on his back without realizing it. Marcus, come here, baby, she called, finally emerging from the kitchen. Let the nice people finish their meeting. Marcus bounded over to her, but not before patting Darius's hand consolingly. It's okay, Wolfman. The sad voices aren't your fault. Sometimes people just need extra hugs and juice boxes to feel better. As Elena scooped up her son and his scattered art supplies, she caught Darius's eye. He looked shaken but not angry, which was something. We'll finish up in the master bathroom, she told him. Come on, Marcus. Let's give everyone some space. But as they headed toward the back of the apartment, Elena heard Marcus whisper loudly, Mama, why does the mean man smell like he wants to bite something? The silence from the conference room was deafening. Elena spent the next hour cleaning the master suite while Marcus built elaborate forts out of towels and provided running commentary on everything from the thread count of Darius's sheets, really soft, like cloud sheep, to the organization of his medicine cabinet, too many bottles, not enough fun colors. She was trying not to listen to the heated discussion coming from the conference room, but the penthouse's open floor plan made privacy impossible. She caught fragments, supernatural exposure, security risk, unprecedented abilities, and each phrase made her stomach clench tighter. When the elevator finally dinged with departing board members, Elena felt like she could breathe again. She found Darius in his office, staring out at Central Park with an expression that made her heart ache. That bad? She asked. That illuminating, Darius replied. Your son just revealed that he can sense pack bonds, emotional states, and probably a dozen other things that are going to make certain people very interested in him. Elena's blood turned to ice. What kind of interested? The kind that involves words like asset and acquisition, Darius said quietly. Elena, I need you to understand something. What Marcus did today, standing up to Caius, reading his emotional state, talking about sad wolf voices, that's not normal human behavior. Even for a gifted child. He's just sensitive, Elena said desperately. Lots of kids are intuitive. Lots of kids don't heal scrapes with their touch or make dead plants bloom, Darius pointed out gently. And they definitely don't have conversations with pack bonds that were severed 2 years ago in a car accident that should have killed me. Elena sank into the chair across from his desk. What are you saying? I'm saying that Marcus isn't just gifted. He's something unprecedented. And now that my board knows about him, it's only a matter of time before word gets out to people who won't have his best interests at heart. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus appeared in the office doorway, dragging his stuffed wolf behind him. Wolfman, are you sad again? He asked, climbing into Elena's lap without invitation. The voices in your head are doing that whimpery thing. I'm okay, little man, Darius said, but Elena could see the lie in the tension around his eyes. You know what you need? Marcus announced, digging into his pocket and producing a slightly crushed pack of goldfish crackers. Alpha Nutrition. Mama says growing boys need snacks, and you're still growing on the inside even if your outside is already big. Darius stared at the offered crackers for a long moment, then started laughing. Not the polite chuckle Elena was used to hearing from him, but genuine, helpless laughter that transformed his entire face. Goldfish crackers, he said, accepting the package with the solemnity usually reserved for state gifts. Of course. The cornerstone of proper alpha nutrition. They're shaped like fishies, but they taste like cheese, Marcus explained seriously. That's philosophy. That's definitely philosophy, Darius agreed, popping a cracker into his mouth. Thank you for sharing your alpha wisdom with me. Elena watched her son beam at the praise and felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't just a job anymore, or even a friendship. Marcus had claimed Darius's pack, and Darius was claiming him right back, unconsciously falling into behaviors that looked suspiciously like pack bonding. Darius, she said carefully, when you say certain people might be interested in Marcus, what exactly do you mean? Darius's expression sobered. I mean that there are supernatural factions who would see a human child with his abilities as either a weapon to be controlled or a threat to be eliminated. And after today's performance, they're going to know he exists. Marcus looked up from where he was sorting goldfish crackers by size. Don't worry, Mama. Wolfman will protect us. That's what alphas do. Elena met Darius's eyes over her son's head and saw her own fear reflected there, along with something that looked like determination. Yeah, Darius said quietly. That's exactly what alphas do. As Marcus began an elaborate explanation of why orange crackers tasted different from regular crackers, the color changes the flavor molecules, obviously, Elena realized they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Her son had claimed a werewolf as family. And judging by the way Darius was listening to Marcus's cracker philosophy with the attention usually reserved for actual business strategies, the werewolf had claimed them right back. Now they just had to figure out how to keep all of them alive long enough to explore what that meant. Chapter 4. Elena was elbow-deep in reorganizing Darius's linen closet when the windows exploded. The sound of shattering glass was followed immediately by snarls, shouts, and what sounded like furniture being thrown across the penthouse. Elena's first instinct was to run toward the chaos, her second, more sensible instinct was to grab Marcus, who was napping peacefully on a pile of Egyptian cotton towels like the world's most expensive cat bed. Mama? Marcus mumbled sleepily as Elena scooped him up. What's that loud noise? Nothing, baby, Elena lied, her heart hammering against her ribs as more crashes echoed from the main living area. Just some very noisy visitors. Through the partially open closet door, she could hear Darius's voice, cold and commanding in a way that made something low in her belly tighten with awareness even in the middle of what was clearly a life-threatening situation. You're trespassing, Darius was saying, his wheelchair apparently positioned between whatever had broken through his windows and the back of the apartment where Elena and Marcus were hidden. Leave now, and I might let you keep all your limbs. The answering laugh was one Elena recognized, and it turned her blood to ice water. Still giving orders from that chair, I see, Victor Redfang's voice carried clearly across the apartment, smooth and cultured and utterly without warmth. Some things never change. Though I have to say, the domestic setup is unexpected. Playing house with humans now, are we? Elena clutched Marcus tighter, her mind racing. Victor had found them. After 2 years of running, of changing names and jobs and apartments, he'd finally tracked them down. And of course it was here, in the one place she'd started to feel safe. I don't know what you're talking about, Darius replied evenly, but Elena could hear the edge in his voice. Though I'm curious how you got past my security. Your doorman was very accommodating once my associates explained the situation, Victor said, and Elena could picture his cold smile. Amazing how cooperative people become when properly motivated. Marcus stirred in Elena's arms, blinking up at her with those two knowing eyes. Mama, why do you smell scared? Elena pressed her lips to his forehead, breathing in his little boy scent of apple juice and crayons. Just some loud people, baby. Everything's fine. But even as she said it, she could hear more movement in the apartment, multiple footsteps, the low growls that meant Victor hadn't come alone. She counted at least 4 distinct voices, maybe more. Where is she, Blackstone? Victor's voice had lost its veneer of civility. Where's Elena? I know she's here. I can smell her fear. I don't know anyone named Elena, Darius lied smoothly. Of course not. Just like you don't know about the boy. Victor's laugh was like broken glass. Did you really think you could hide them from me? The woman who stole my son? The child who carries prophecy in his blood? Elena's free hand flew to her mouth to muffle her gasp. Marcus looked up at her with curious eyes, apparently unbothered by the increasingly hostile voices coming from the other room. Are those the bad guys? He whispered, loud enough that Elena was sure everyone in the apartment could hear him. They're very loud. The silence that followed was deafening. There he is, Victor said, his voice dropping to something almost tender. My beautiful boy. Come to Papa, Marcus. It's time to go home. I don't think so, Darius said, and something in his tone made Elena shiver. It was the voice of someone who'd been pushed too far, someone who'd found their line in the sand and was prepared to defend it with everything they had. You're going to stop me? You can barely stop yourself from falling out of that chair. Elena heard the whisper of movement, the soft whir of Darius's wheelchair, and then his voice again, but different this time. Deeper. Resonating with an authority that seemed to fill the entire apartment and press against Elena's skin like a physical force. I said no. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The snarls and growls that had been building in the background cut off abruptly, replaced by whimpers and what sounded like bodies hitting the floor. What? Victor's voice cracked. How are you doing that?
2 years of physical therapy teaches you interesting things about breath control and vocal projection, Darius replied conversationally. Turns out losing the use of your legs doesn't necessarily diminish your alpha command. It just concentrates it differently. Elena found herself pressing against the closet wall, Marcus still drowsy in her arms, as power rolled through the apartment in waves. She should be terrified, she was terrified, but there was something else mixed in with the fear, something that made her skin flush and her pulse quicken in ways that were entirely inappropriate for their current situation. Darius Blackstone, paralyzed from the waist down, was single-handedly controlling a pack of rogue werewolves with nothing but his voice. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was stupidly, ridiculously attractive. Elena, Darius called, his voice gentler now but still carrying that undertone of command. It's safe to come out now. Elena hesitated, Marcus heavy in her arms. Through the crack in the door, she could see what looked like 5 grown men on their knees in her employer's living room, their heads bowed in submission. Victor was fighting it, his whole body shaking with the effort, but even he was on the ground. Mama, Marcus said, patting her cheek with one small hand. Wolfman is calling us. Taking a deep breath, Elena pushed open the closet door and stepped into the main apartment. The scene was surreal. Darius sat calmly in his wheelchair in the center of the room, surrounded by kneeling werewolves like some kind of modern-day king holding court. His hair was disheveled, his expensive shirt was torn at the shoulder, but his eyes were steady as they met hers. Are you hurt? He asked. Elena shook her head, not trusting her voice. Marcus, meanwhile, was surveying the scene with interest. Are we playing a kneeling game? He asked brightly. I'm good at games. Victor's head snapped up, his pale eyes fixing on Marcus with an intensity that made Elena's skin crawl. Marcus, he said, his voice rough with effort. Son. Do you remember Papa? Marcus studied Victor for a long moment, then shook his head. Nope. But you smell like angry and want things that aren't yours. Mama taught me about that smell. I taught him stranger danger, Elena said quietly. Among other things. He's not a stranger, Victor snarled, some of his composure cracking. He's my son. My blood. Mine. Biology doesn't make you a father, Darius said mildly. And possession definitely doesn't. You don't understand, Victor said, his eyes still locked on Marcus. He's not just my son. He's the golden child. The bridge between worlds. He's prophesied to unite the supernatural and human worlds. Yeah, I figured that out, Darius interrupted. The healing abilities, the emotional sensitivity, the way he can sense pack bonds across species lines. It's not exactly subtle. Elena stared at him. You knew? I suspected after the first week, Darius admitted. The real question is why you've been running instead of seeking protection from the supernatural authorities. Elena felt bitter laughter bubble up in her throat. Because the supernatural authorities are the ones who want to use him. You think Victor's the only one interested in a prophesied child? There are factions that would lock him in a room and study him like a lab rat. Others that would train him to be their perfect weapon. And some that would rather see him dead than risk him choosing the wrong side. So you ran, Darius said. For 2 years. For 2 years, Elena confirmed. Changed our names, our identities, kept moving. I thought we were safe here. I thought. She looked around at the destroyed apartment, at the kneeling werewolves, at Darius holding them all in place with nothing but his voice. I thought maybe we could have something normal. Normal is overrated, Marcus said solemnly, apparently following the conversation better than any 3-year-old should. Besides, Wolfman makes the best alpha nutrition, and he smells like safety pack home. Victor's composure finally shattered completely. He's mine, he roared, trying to surge to his feet. The word of command that left Darius's throat wasn't quite human. It hit the room like a physical blow, driving Victor back to his knees and making the other rogues whimper in submission. He belongs to no one, Darius said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. He's a child, not a possession. And if you come near him again, I will remind you exactly why they called me the wheelchair warrior. Elena felt something shift in her chest, something warm and fierce and protective that had nothing to do with her own maternal instincts and everything to do with the way this complicated, powerful, gentle man was defending her son. Why? Victor asked, his voice broken. Why would you protect them? They're human. They're nothing to you. Darius looked at Elena, then at Marcus, who had started to drift off to sleep again against his mother's shoulder, apparently unbothered by the supernatural standoff happening around him. They're not nothing, Darius said quietly. They're pack. The word hung in the air like a declaration of war. Victor's pale eyes widened. You can't be serious. You're pack bonding with humans? You'll be stripped of your alpha status. The council will. The council will do nothing, Darius said calmly. Because they need me more than I need them. And because I've just demonstrated that my alpha abilities are stronger than they've ever been, not weaker. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Pack. He'd called them pack. Not employees, not charity cases, not convenient humans to protect out of some misplaced sense of nobility. Pack. Elena, Victor said, turning his attention to her with desperate intensity. You can't trust him. He's using you, using Marcus. The moment he gets what he wants. What I want, Darius interrupted, is for Elena to stop looking over her shoulder every 5 minutes. What I want is for Marcus to grow up knowing he's valued for who he is, not what he can do. What I want is for both of them to be safe and happy and free to make their own choices about their future. And what do you get out of it? Victor sneered. Darius was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes soft as they rested on Elena and her sleeping son. I get to remember what it feels like to protect something that matters, he said finally. I get to watch Marcus heal the world one scraped knee and dead houseplant at a time. And I get to discover that maybe being broken doesn't mean you can't still be whole. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Around them, the kneeling werewolves remained frozen in place, held by nothing but Darius's will and the authority in his voice. This isn't over, Victor said, but his tone had lost its conviction. No, Darius agreed. But the next time you want to have this conversation, you'll make an appointment like a civilized person. And you'll remember that Marcus gets to choose his own path when he's old enough to understand what that means. He's 3 years old. Exactly. Which means he has 15 years to figure out who he wants to be before anyone gets to make demands about his destiny. Darius's voice hardened again. Now get out of my home before I decide that letting you leave is too generous. Elena watched as Victor and his pack slowly, reluctantly got to their feet and began moving toward the shattered windows they'd entered through. Victor paused at the threshold, looking back at Marcus one last time. I won't give up, he said quietly. He's my blood. Blood doesn't make family, Elena said, finding her voice at last. Love does. Choice does. And Marcus will choose for himself when he's ready. After they were gone, the apartment felt almost unnaturally quiet. Elena looked around at the destruction, shattered glass, overturned furniture, scuff marks on the marble floors, and felt a hysterical laugh building in her throat. Well, she said shakily, I guess I'm fired. Actually, Darius said, rolling his wheelchair closer to her, I was thinking we might need to renegotiate your contract. This job just got significantly more dangerous. Darius. Elena. He reached out and gently touched her arm, his fingers warm against her skin. What Victor said about Marcus being the golden child. About the prophecy. Is it true? Elena closed her eyes, Marcus's warm weight in her arms the only thing keeping her grounded. According to the woman who delivered him, yes. She was some kind of supernatural midwife, said she'd been waiting her whole life to help bring the bridged child into the world. She told me he'd have the ability to heal, to sense emotions across species, to bring peace between the supernatural and human worlds. And then Victor found out. And then Victor decided he wanted to control that power, Elena confirmed. He saw Marcus as his ticket to ruling both worlds. When I refused to hand over our son to be raised as his personal weapon. She shrugged. We ran. For 2 years. For 2 years, Elena repeated. Until a sticky-fingered toddler decided to crown the wheelchair warrior with dandelions at graduation. Darius smiled at that, the expression transforming his entire face. Best graduation gift I've ever received. Marcus stirred in Elena's arms, blinking up at them with sleepy eyes. Are the loud people gone? He asked. They're gone, Darius assured him. Though we might need to work on some security upgrades. Can we get a dragon? Marcus asked hopefully. Dragons are really good at keeping bad people away. I'll look into it, Darius said solemnly. In the meantime, what do you think about staying here for a while? Just until we figure out a more permanent solution. Elena's heart stuttered. Darius, you don't have to. I want to, he said simply. You're packed now. Both of you. That means you're safe here, and Marcus can grow up knowing he's valued for exactly who he is. Marcus beamed at him. Can I still put flowers in your hair? Only if they're the good kind, Darius said seriously. None of those sad dandelions. We need the happy ones. As Elena looked around at the destroyed penthouse that somehow still felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived in 2 years, she realized that maybe running wasn't the answer anymore. Maybe it was time to stop fleeing and start fighting. And maybe, just maybe, they'd found something worth fighting for. Chapter 5. Elena had always suspected that morning sickness got its name because whoever named it had a twisted sense of humor. Morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night sickness would have been more accurate. 3 weeks into hiding in a supernatural penthouse while nauseous and exhausted, sickness was probably too long for medical textbooks, but it felt more honest. She was curled up on Darius's couch, trying to convince her stomach that crackers were food and not the enemy, when Marcus wandered over with his stuffed wolf clutched in one hand and a very serious expression on his 3-year-old face. "Mama, you smell different," he announced, climbing onto the couch beside her. "Like growing things. But also like you ate bad cheese." Elena managed a weak laugh. "Thanks for the confidence boost, baby." "Are you growing a baby?" Marcus asked with the casual directness of a child who'd never learned that some questions were supposed to be private. Mrs. Rodriguez next door smelled like growing things when she had the baby in her tummy. Elena's cracker turned to dust in her mouth. "Marcus, we don't." "Is it Wolfman's baby?" Marcus continued, apparently unbothered by her obvious discomfort. "Because that would be really cool. I could teach it about color volume and proper snack organization." Before Elena could figure out how to explain the complexities of adult relationships to a toddler, Darius appeared in the doorway of his office, his expression carefully neutral. "Everything okay out here?" he asked. "Mama's growing a baby," Marcus announced helpfully. "I can smell it." The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded either very good news or complete disaster. Elena couldn't decide which category this fell into. "Marcus," Elena said carefully, "we've talked about keeping some things private." "But it's good news." Marcus protested. "Babies are good. Even if they make mamas smell like cheese and sleepy all the time." Darius had gone very still in his wheelchair, his dark eyes fixed on Elena's face with an intensity that made her want to hide under the expensive throw pillows. "Elena," he said quietly. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Elena felt heat creep up her neck. This was not how she'd planned to have this conversation. She'd barely had time to process the reality herself, between the nausea, the exhaustion, and the minor detail of hiding from supernatural factions who wanted to kidnap her son. "I was going to tell you," she said finally. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" "Complicated like I took a pregnancy test yesterday and I'm still trying to figure out how to feel about it," Elena admitted. "Complicated like we've known each other for exactly 3 weeks and our relationship status is somewhere between employer-employee and whatever the supernatural equivalent of friends with benefits is." "The supernatural equivalent is mate," Marcus said helpfully. "That's what Wolfman's pack smell says about you." Both adults stared at the 3-year-old, who was now arranging goldfish crackers by size on the coffee table with the focus of a tiny professor. "You can smell that?" Darius asked. "Uh-huh. You smell like Mama is mine, protect, keep safe, love her. It's really loud, actually. Sometimes it wakes me up at night." Elena wanted to disappear into the couch cushions. "Marcus, we don't announce people's private feelings." Her lecture was interrupted by the elevator doors sliding open. Elena expected to see the usual parade of business associates or delivery people that populated Darius's daily life. Instead, Caius Blackstone stepped out, followed by 3 men Elena didn't recognize but who carried themselves with the predatory grace she'd learned to associate with werewolves. "Brother," Caius said, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to talk." Darius moved his wheelchair between his brother and the couch where Elena and Marcus sat. "I wasn't aware we had an appointment." "Oh, this isn't a social call," Caius replied, pulling out his phone and tapping the screen. "This is more of a coordination meeting." The phone buzzed with an incoming video call, and Elena's blood turned to ice when she saw Victor's face appear on the screen. "Ah, there's my beautiful family," Victor said, his voice carrying clearly across the apartment. "Elena, darling, you look a bit pale. Pregnancy agreeing with you?" Elena's hand flew instinctively to her still flat stomach. "How did you?" "Enhanced senses are useful for more than just tracking," Victor said smoothly. "I could smell the change in your hormones from 3 blocks away during our last visit. Congratulations, by the way. A golden child and now a potential half-breed heir. You really know how to pick them." Marcus looked up from his crackers, apparently unbothered by the hostile atmosphere. Uncle Caius smells like lies and sadness, he announced conversationally. Also like he doesn't get enough hugs. Caius's expression twisted with something that might have been hurt if Elena didn't know better. Shut up, you little freak. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Darius's voice, when he spoke, was deadly quiet. Apologize. Now. Or what? Caius laughed, but Elena could hear the strain in it. You'll alpha command me from your wheelchair? We both know your little party trick only works on rogues and weaklings. Try me, Darius said simply. For a moment, Elena thought Caius might actually back down. Then his phone buzzed with a text, and his expression shifted into something uglier. Actually, I think we'll pass on the dominance games today, he said, gesturing to his companions. We have a much more interesting proposition. What happened next was chaos. One of Caius's men lunged for Marcus while another grabbed Elena. She fought back, scratching and kicking and screaming, but supernatural strength was hard to argue with. In the confusion, she heard Marcus crying for his stuffed wolf, which had been knocked under the coffee table during the struggle. No! Marcus wailed, reaching for his beloved toy. Mr. Wolfie. I need Mr. Wolfie. Elena broke free from her captor for just a moment, diving for the stuffed animal. She managed to grab it just as strong hands hauled her back, but not before she pressed it into Marcus's reaching fingers. It's okay, baby, she gasped as they dragged her toward the elevator. Wolfman will keep you safe. I love you. Mama. Marcus screamed, trying to wiggle out of Darius's protective grip. The last thing Elena saw before the elevator doors closed was Darius's face, twisted with rage and helplessness, and Marcus clutching his stuffed wolf while tears streamed down his cheeks. 3 hours later, Elena was zip-tied to a chair in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse, fighting waves of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy and everything to do with the scent of unwashed werewolf and industrial cleaning supplies. Victor paced in front of her like a caged predator, his phone pressed to his ear as he coordinated what sounded like a very elaborate plan to destroy Darius's life piece by piece. The terms are simple, he was saying, presumably to Darius on the other end. Step down as Alpha of the Northeast Territories, transfer all pack leadership to my associate Mr. Caius Blackstone, and sign over custody of Marcus to his biological father. Do all of that, and Elena gets to live. Refuse. He shrugged eloquently. Elena couldn't hear Darius's response, but whatever he said made Victor's smile turn predatory. Oh, I'm sure you'll think of something, Victor purred. You have until sunset. Don't keep us waiting. He hung up and turned to Elena with satisfaction. Your boyfriend is remarkably attached to you for such a brief acquaintance. I wonder what he'll choose, his power or your life? He'll choose the right thing, Elena said through gritted teeth, trying to ignore the way her stomach was churning. He always does. How touching. And naive. Victor pulled up a chair across from her, settling in like he was planning to stay a while. Tell me, does he know about the baby yet? Because I have to say, the timing is either incredible luck or incredibly poor planning. Elena said nothing, but Victor seemed to take her silence as confirmation. A hybrid child, he mused. Werewolf and human, prophesied child as older brother, raised by the former Alpha King. Do you have any idea what that kind of power combination could do to the supernatural world? Create peace? Elena suggested sarcastically. Create chaos, Victor corrected. The old ways are ending, Elena. The supernatural world is changing, whether we want it to or not. The question is who's going to control that change. Before Elena could respond, her stomach finally gave up the fight. She doubled over as much as the zip ties would allow, retching helplessly onto the concrete floor. Oh, for crying out loud, Victor muttered, stepping back in disgust. Could you not? His complaint was interrupted by his phone ringing. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. What is it, Caius? You were supposed to wait for my signal before. Elena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but Victor's expression gradually shifted from annoyance to concern to what looked like panic. "What do you mean he's not responding?" Victor snapped. "We have his mate, he should be." Another pause. "Well, wake the boy up. Use him if you have to." Elena's blood turned to ice. "If you hurt my son." "Shut up," Victor snarled, but she could see uncertainty creeping into his features. "Caius, what exactly is happening over there?" Back in the penthouse, Darius was discovering that 3-year-olds had their own approach to crisis management. Marcus had cried himself to sleep approximately 20 minutes after Elena's kidnapping, curled up in Darius's lap with his stuffed wolf clutched tightly in his arms. Every attempt to wake him for strategic planning had been met with the kind of boneless, immovable unconsciousness that only small children could achieve. "This is ridiculous," Caius said, pacing in front of Darius's desk like a caged animal. "Wake him up. Use whatever freaky connection you two have developed." "I'm not using a traumatized child as a weapon," Darius replied calmly, one hand resting protectively on Marcus's back. "Even if I could." "You're going to let Elena die for your principles?" "I'm going to find a third option," Darius said. "There's always a third option." "Not this time." Caius pulled out his phone and showed Darius the screen, which displayed a live video feed of Elena tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. She was pale and clearly nauseous, but alive. "Victor's terms are non-negotiable. Your alpha status for her life." Darius studied his brother's face, noting the tension around his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly as he held the phone. "You don't want to do this," he said quietly. "Of course I don't want to," Caius caught himself, his expression hardening again. "This is business, Darius. The pack needs strong leadership, not someone who can't even. Someone who can't even walk." Darius finished. "Is that what you were going to say?" "Someone who's been compromised," Caius corrected. "Pack bonding with humans, taking in prophesied children, getting distracted by domesticity. You've lost focus." "I've found purpose," Darius countered. "There's a difference." Marcus stirred in his lap, mumbling something unintelligible. Darius gently smoothed his hair, and the child's eyes fluttered open. "Wolfman?" Marcus's voice was thick with sleep. "Where's Mama?" "Some bad people took her," Darius said honestly. "But we're going to get her back." Marcus sat up, still clutching his stuffed wolf, and looked around the apartment with those two knowing eyes. When his gaze landed on Caius, his expression grew solemn. "You helped them take Mama," he said matter-of-factly. "I'm trying to help your family," Caius said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Mama says heroes don't quit, they just find different ways to win," Marcus said, looking up at Darius with absolute trust. "Also, Uncle Caius smells like lies and sadness. Lots and lots of sadness. Kid." Caius started, but Marcus was already scrambling to his feet on Darius's lap, placing his small hands on either side of the man's face. "Don't be sad, Wolfman," Marcus said earnestly. "We'll fix it. We always fix things." The moment his palms made contact with Darius's skin, electricity shot through the connection. Darius gasped as sensation flooded his legs, not movement, but feeling. The phantom ache of muscles that hadn't responded in 2 years, the strange pressure of weight distribution, the memory of what it felt like to stand. But along with the sensation came something else, an overwhelming sense of Marcus's life force pouring into him, bright and warm and far too much for a 3-year-old to sustain. "Marcus, stop," Darius said urgently, trying to break the connection, but the child's hand seemed fused to his face. "I can fix you," Marcus said, his voice taking on an otherworldly quality. "I can make you strong enough to save Mama." "Not at the cost of your life," Darius said firmly, finally managing to capture Marcus's wrists and pull his hands away. "Never at that cost." Marcus swayed, suddenly pale and exhausted, and Darius caught him as he collapsed back into his lap. "Did it work?" Marcus whispered. "Can you feel your legs now?" The sensation was already fading, but Darius could still feel the echo of it, the possibility, the connection, the reminder of what he'd lost. More importantly, he could feel the bond that now stretched between him and the child in his arms. Not pack bonding, not proximity. Something deeper, more fundamental. Family. It worked, Darius said softly, meeting Caius's stunned gaze over Marcus's head. Just not the way you think. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from Victor. Darius answered it, his voice steady as steel. I have your answer, he said without preamble. Excellent. I assume you're ready to. I'm ready to remind you exactly why they called me the wheelchair warrior, Darius interrupted. And why pack bonding with humans doesn't make me weaker. It makes me something you'll never understand. What's that supposed to mean? It means you just made the mistake of threatening my family, Darius said, his voice dropping to something that made Caius take an involuntary step backward. All of my family. And that includes the brother who's been stupid enough to betray me but is finally starting to smell like regret instead of lies. Marcus had fallen asleep again, but this time his breathing was steady, his color good. The bond between them hummed quietly, no longer draining but simply present. A connection that went both ways, offering strength instead of stealing it. Caius, Darius said quietly, still holding his nephew's gaze. Last chance. Are you with us, or are you with them? For a long moment, Caius stared at them. At his brother holding a human child who'd just tried to heal him with his own life force, at the peaceful expression on Marcus's sleeping face, at the bonds of family that apparently transcended species and genetics and pack politics. I'm with family, Caius said finally, his voice rough with emotion. Always with family. Darius smiled, and for the first time in 2 years, it felt like the expression of an alpha who knew exactly how to win. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to be the first to get notified when the part 2 of this story drops.